Hello again. So just change of scenery today. I'm kind of out on the road. I've got quite a lot of travelling to do over the next few days. I've got guitar lessons to record as well, so I'm trying to make the most of my time just shooting a quick lesson here in a hotel room. So apologies if there's a bit of background noise with people traipsing up and down the corridor outside. Anyway, here goes. This lesson I wanted to cover something that's one of the real staples of guitar playing, and that's the 12-bar blues progression. I think it's one of the first sort of like things that you learn as a guitarist. Once you've got your fingers around some chords, you put them together into a 12-bar blues chord progression. And something you'll hear all over the place. It's really, really common. And anytime guitarists get together to jam, they tend to jam around on the 12-bar blues. It's a really good starting point. It's kind of common ground for everybody. 12-bar blues progression is really simple. If you think about we're playing in a key. Let's say we're playing in the key of A major. The structure of the 12-bar blues is we'll have 4 bars of the 1 chord, so in the key of A major that would be the A chord, so we'll have 4 bars of that. Then 2 bars of the 4 chord, so in the key of A major that's A, B, C sharp and D, so D is the 4 chord, so 2 bars of that. Then back to the 1 chord, A major in this case for 2 bars. Then we'll get 1 bar of the 5 chord, so in the key of A major the 5 chord is E major. Then 1 bar of the 4 chord again, which is D major, the key of A major, and then back to the 1 chord, A major in our example, for 2 bars. And just playing with straight major chords, it sounds like this. And then that can just kind of keep going and going and going. Now, what I want to kind of touch on in this lesson is things we can do to just kind of embellish that a little bit and make it, it's still the 12-bar blues progression, but just ways we can kind of treat it a little bit differently to make it a bit more interesting. And so the first problem you sort of have is because you start off with 4 bars of the 1 chord and you finish with 2 bars of the 1 chord. If you go back into the progression, that's like 6 bars all of the same chord, and it can get a little bit monotonous. And you haven't got an obvious transition between where you're ending one repetition of the progression and starting the next iteration of it. So the first sort of variation I'd show you on that is when you're playing that last bar. So rather than playing 2 bars of the 1 chord at the end, play 1 bar of the 1 chord, and then for the final bar, play a 5/7 chord. What do I mean by 5/7 chord? Well, what we're going to play is the dominant 7 chord that's based on the 5th degree. So in the case of A major, all the examples we're going to do here are in the key of A major. So the 5 chord of A major is E, so that last chord we're going to play in E7. And that gives us a progression that sounds like this. And so on, and you can hear the fact that we're ending on that last chord of the progression, the E7 chord. It gives us a distinct finish of one iteration of the progression and the start of another, but that E7 chord sounds quite unresolved and it wants to go somewhere, and a natural place for it to go is up an interval of a perfect fourth, going up from E to A in the root note. So it takes us from E7 to A major. That gets us into the 1 chord of the progression, and the whole thing starts again. So I've introduced the idea there of using dominant 7 chords. Another place we can use dominant 7 chords is in bars 9 and 10. So rather than playing just the 5 chord, the E major, and the 4 chord, the D major, we could play dominant 7 chords. Now, if you know your music theory, you'll know that E7 belongs in the key of A major, but D7 doesn't. Don't worry too much about that. It's one of those things, it's kind of wrong, but it works in the context of blues, because blues has sometimes got this idea of like blue notes and outside notes that come in, give you the bluesy sort of feeling. So we can get away with using dominant 7 chords like this. So what I'll do is I'll play that progression through, but I'm going to substitute in some dominant 7 chords in bars 9 and 10, and finishing on an E7 chord on bar 12. selector there adds a bit more kind of just flavour to it. Rather than just playing straight major chords all the way through, we've got some dominant 7 chords going on. Let's kind of run with that idea of using some extra dominant 7 chords and think about what's happening in the first 4 bars of the progression. Now, we kind of broke the progression up a little bit by using a dominant 7 chord on bar 12, so we don't have a block of 6 if we're going from one iteration of the progression to another. But we're still starting off with 4 major chords, and it can get a little bit monotonous. Something we can do just to add a little bit of flavour is to play a dominant 7th chord on, say, the 4th bar, and that has sort of two benefits. Firstly, it just breaks up the monotony, so rather than having 4 bars of A major, we're going to only have 3 bars of A major and then 1 bar of A7. And the other thing is, so I was saying before about the E7 chord wants to resolve up to an A major chord, it wants to go up by an interval of the perfect 4th. That A7 chord is going to want to resolve up an interval of the perfect 4th, which would take us to D major, which is the next chord in the progression. So I could play in A dominant 7 chord, I guess I'd play it like that. I could play it like that. Different ways of playing it, different voices, but it's the same thing. It's the A dominant 7 chord. Again, not diatonic to the key, but we can get away with it because this is blues. So okay, I'll play that progression through, bringing in dominant 7 chord on bar 4, dominant 7 chords on bar 9 and 10, and finishing on a 5/7 chord. Okay, so that sounds a bit more interesting again. Still the basic 12-bar blues progression, we can recognise that, still got that distinctive feel, but it's starting to sound a little bit more interesting because we're bringing in different chord types rather than just using the major chord all the way through. The last thing I'm going to do is a thing called a turnaround. Now, turnaround, we're going to bring in a whole bunch of different chords here on the last 2 bars. So we've already done one thing to kind of stop it getting kind of one progression blurring into the other by having that dominant 7 chord on the last bar. What we're going to do is just completely tear up the last 2 bars and play a whole bunch of different chords. So what we're going to play, and again, some of these are not diatonic to the key, but it doesn't matter, it's blues, we can get away with it. So on the last bar, instead of playing an A major all the way through, we're going to play an A major, we're going to play an A7, we're going to play a D major, we're going to play a D minor, which is really not in the key, but when you play it through you'll hear how well it works. So that's our last bar. Sorry, that's our second last bar, and then for the last bar we'll just play an A major and then finish on an E7. Show you how that sounds. Yeah, that just kind of turns the whole thing around. Like it's called a turnaround. It just gives you some lift at the end, and then goes into the next progression, next sort of iteration of the progression. You can hear where one section finishes and the next one starts, and it's interesting. We're using lots of different chord types, and it's more interesting for the listener. So this is something to think about if you're using 12-bar blues as a vehicle for jamming with. If you're just playing the same major chord types all the way through, it gets boring for you as a player. It gets boring for the listener, and it kind of starts to get a bit restrictive for the people that you're jamming with, because whoever's playing a lead line over the top of those chords, a good lead guitarist kind of interacts with the underlying chords and brings out certain notes in the lead line to complement what's being played in the chordal part. And if you're just playing the same type of chord over and over again, it doesn't give the guy who's soloing much of a vehicle to work with. But if you can bring in some different chord types, you know, if you're playing like that E7 chord there, it's bringing in Mixolydian type tonality, which the guy who's soloing can kind of play off and incorporate into the feel of what he's using in the lead line. So that's the basics of like how you can start to vary the 12-bar blues progression, bringing in some dominant 7 chords, using turnarounds at the end. There's other ways you can take it, but that's just kind of as a starting point and something for you to think about when you're playing chord progressions. We use an example here with the 12-bar blues, but it applies, I guess, to any chord progression. You've got other chord types at your disposal, so do think about using them rather than just sticking to really basic chord types. Look at using like 7 chords or suspended chords or extended chords as well that bring out the modal sounds and so on. That it's more interesting for you, it's more interesting for the listener, and gives a lot more scope for the guy who's playing solos over the top. Now, to be honest, even if you're playing the same chord type but you look for different voicings of it, different inversions around the neck, it'll start to sound different and gives you a bit of variety and something for the lead player to play off. Okay, that'll do for now. As like I say, it's not ideal recording conditions here, but I wanted to get a lesson recorded and in the bag while I was out and about. Hopefully you found that useful. If you did, as always, please click like, and if you really enjoyed it, please click subscribe down there and you'll see other videos that I post onto the channel. If you want to leave a comment, you're welcome to, but if you've got a specific question you want to ask me, whether it's about music theory, guitar playing, guitar equipment, anything at all, you're probably better off going here, filling that form in and sending your question in through there. I don't always see comments that's left on YouTube videos, but if you send a question in through that form, I'm guaranteed to see it and I'll be able to get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you back in the studio sometime soon. Bye for now.